right, buddy. Hey, listen, I read your bio. I'm excited. I followed you on YouTube. I'm one of the other, 27,000 people that follow you on YouTube. And I'm really excited because I'll tell you, Brenden, communication's huge. And I think the majority of us do it really poor. And you've got an awesome company called MasterTalk, and your content is fantastic. First of all, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here, brother. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Joshua, the pleasure is absolutely mine. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, well, first of all, let's start before we go really into it. How'd you get into it? Why did you get into it? And what's the problem you were trying to solve for yourself?
Yeah, for sure. It's a great way of starting the conversation. So it all started when I was in business school. I went to university, Josh, and I started doing these things called case competitions. Think of it like professional sports, but for nerds. So while the guys my age were playing, rugby or baseball or football, I wasn't one of those guys, as you can tell by looking at me. So I did presentations competitively. That's how I learned how to speak. But then as I got older, I started coaching a lot of the students in college on how to communicate, not because I was a great coach, but because the alternative they had was a rock. So they picked me and I started working with them. And that's how I got really good at coaching.
Okay.
And then by the time I was probably 21, 22, I'd accumulated decades worth of communication knowledge. So I coached like 50 to 75 different people on how to speak. And that's what led to the YouTube channel. But it was never intended to be a business. I just started making videos for fun because I had a great job lined up at IBM and I was going to work there full time. And I did do that for a few years. But as I was posting videos, it just turned into something I never could have imagined.
So I guess when you were doing it, did you know you were a good communicator? Or were you just like absorbing so much information and you're like, I'm just regurgitating it? Like, tell me that process, because I don't think a lot of people think they're good at what they're doing, or that they're good at something that they want to do. How did you know that you were good, or how did you become the teacher in that aspect?
Yeah, for sure, Joshua. So I didn't think I was a great communicator most of my life. Just to give you some context, I was born and raised in a city called Montreal in Canada. And for those who don't know who are listening to this, Montreal is a city where you need to know how to speak French, which is a language I didn't know. So my whole life, not only did I struggle with communication, I was presenting in a language I didn't know.
Yeah.
So when I go up to my first and second grade classroom, I would look at the crowd and go, bonjour. And that was my life growing up as a kid. The second challenge is I have a crooked left arm because of a surgery I had when I was younger.
Huh.
So because of that, I had a lot of social anxiety just talking to people, and I couldn't understand them because I couldn't speak French. And you would think that a communication expert studied in communication. Yeah, I got a bachelor's degree in accounting, man. So there you go. Definitely a lot of challenges. So I never thought I was that great of a communicator most of my life. It was only in the last few years when I went back to English school, because I studied in French most of my life, that I actually realized I was really good at it, because I started winning a lot of these case competitions. And that's when I realized I had a knack for it.
Was there just as a side note, do you feel like, was there a formula that you followed that allowed you to win? Or once again, were you just, to be honest with you, very natural at it? I could talk to people, I could communicate really well. People understood what I was saying, and I hit the points that I needed to make.
The answer is a mix. So I definitely had some natural talent, but there were some key points in those competitions specifically that did make us win. So I'll give you a fun example. Let's say Walmart was a case sponsor a few years ago. Basically, they would give us a problem. They would say, hey, Joshua, Brenden, I'm opening a new store. Where should I open it? And that's an example of a business problem. And then we would come up with a solution. I think you should opening in Wyoming instead of somewhere else. Example. But then what would happen is, usually if you're competing against 13 other teams, 5 of them have the right answer. But now it's about deciding who gets first place and who gets fifth place and second place, etc. And the way that you differentiate yourself from the other teams, frankly, at that level, is really through presentation skills. So let's say, and remember, we're all in our 20s at this point, and a lot of the times the judges are the executives at Walmart. They're not some random people they pulled off the street. So I remember once there was one of the judges was like the senior vice president of Walmart Canada, literally the guy under the CEO, and you're just like, oh shit. So one of those teams would come up, Joshua, and say, like, they would start the presentations like this. Oh, hi everyone. My name is Brenden. This is Joshua. And today we're going to talk. They wouldn't give them eye contact, but it's normal because they're 20-year-old kids, right?
Yeah.
But then our team would come up And then we would look at the judges and start like this. Ever since I was a kid, I always loved going to Walmart. The groceries, the electronics, it felt like Santa was coming to town. It just wasn't Christmas. It was year-long. So they start talking about their childhood memories, and then they start their introduction by going, "Good afternoon to the board of directors of Walmart." So super professional.
Yeah.
And the VP would look at us and go, "Shit, these guys are presenting better than my vice presidents. I should probably give them a job." So that would be the formula there.
That's awesome. I love it. Well, one of the things you do at MasterTalk is that you do work with executives and entrepreneurs to become what you would say the top 1% communicators in their industry. And as I was looking at that, I'm like, okay, how do you know you become the top 1%? And I got to imagine you would have an answer for that. So how do you become the top 1% of your industry?
Absolutely, Josh. You know, it's super fun you asking the questions because there's a poster behind you, which I think summarizes the answer to the question.
Right.
And that I'll repeat for those who are listening to the audio.
Because they're probably, if they're not watching it on YouTube, they're listening to this. So
absolutely. In order to become the top 1%, you must do what the other 99% aren't willing to do. And I think that summarizes what it means. But to be more concrete, there's 3 specific things that I feel the top 1% do. But let's start with the definition first. I don't define top 1% as top 1% in the world, because that's a really hard outcome to hit. I meant more in the sense of top 1% in your industry, meaning that if you're competing against 99 other plumbers in your local city, that you're the number 1 communicator in that group of 100 plumbers. If you're an electrician, you're the best electrician. If you're an accountant, etc. Right? So that's the way I define it. So for most of these industries, top 1% is actually not that hard to achieve versus like if you're in a group of professional speakers. So what are those 3 things? One is consistency. A lot of us don't practice communication on a consistent enough basis. And we'll talk a lot about these strategies as we go about this interview. But a lot of these 3 things, I have never met anybody who has done all the exercises we talked about before ever talking to me. So that's one piece, consistency, which we'll dive into a little bit later. The second one is vision. A lot of us have goals with our businesses, our relationships, our health, Joshua, but very few of us have communication goals. Very specific, tangible communication goals. And the way that we teach our clients to do this, that people can copy, is we make them compare themselves to other speakers that they admire and really detail what is the delta, the gap between them and the people they want to become. So it's easier for them to measure those goals. And then finally, number 3 is really the idea of communication why. A lot of us don't really have a deeper why as to why they want to actually be better communicators. Why is that important to them? And if that why isn't strong enough, they'll never become top 1% of their industry in this skill set. And those would be the top 3 things I would define top 1% as.
How long does it take somebody typically? Like when you're working with an entrepreneur and they're raising their hand, they're like, I want to be in the top of my industry. I understand that communication is a challenge for me. Is it a 6 month? Is it a year? Is it 2 years? Like what do people have to look at in the sense of their commitment and when they can expect to be like, okay, I think I'm getting there, man. I think I'm actually feeling pretty good about this.
Yeah, absolutely, Joshua. So definitely, people can get quick levels of improvement just a few weeks, right? Or even a few months. I would say the average person to get like ridiculous results, to like be better than most of their industry, it could take upwards of a year. A lot of students get results in a few weeks, depending on how hardcore they are. But the thing I will add as a caveat that your audience might not appreciate is the idea that the top 1% in any industry always believe that they aren't in the top 1% of their industry. Yeah, right? They always believe. I always invest 10 to 100 times more in myself every year than what I charge my clients, even other communication coaches, because I always believe I'm not the best in the world. And that's what makes me or gives me a shot at being that one day. But I would say for just drastic improvement, which we'll talk about when you ask me around what some exercises people can do, people could easily get results in just a matter of a few weeks if they put the attention and focus towards it.
Well, I like what you said right there with what you're willing to do to invest in yourself. And I think one of the things as I talk to so many entrepreneurs or I'm coaching entrepreneurs is that they have to get to this point that they're worthy of investing in. they're worthy of actually spending money on themselves for the betterment of all those that they're serving, right? And in that transition, as I look at my life and my transition from the sports realm to the business realm, I didn't understand that. I didn't understand the importance of it. And it was like, it was common knowledge when you're playing sports. Well, yeah, you hire a coach or you have a coach. You look for those that have been there and done that, and you glean their wisdom. We should do that in the same aspect of business and or an area of your life that you're wanting to improve on. And I will say everybody is looking to be a better communicator, whether it's in business or it's in life.
Absolutely, I completely agree, especially in the context of comms, where there's always a next level for all of us, for sure.
Yeah. What do you see right now when it comes to communication? Obviously, we went through 3 years of the pandemic. People were isolated like they'd never been before, held up into their houses or their apartments or their rooms. Um, where do you believe we need to be going back to, or where do most people, when it comes to communication, lack the skills in that they need improvement in?
Yeah, for sure, Joshua. You know what I would say is a couple of things. One is really the in-person social interaction that's been missing for a lot of us these past few years. It's a lot harder for us to strike up that conversation, to go up to people and say hello like it was before, because we're just so accustomed to staying inside of the prism of our house. So it's hard
Yeah.
to meet new people. So I would say to just get warmed up, right? Slowly ease yourself back into it. Even for me, I started going back to conferences last year. It was really nerve-wracking, even for the communication guy. I
Really?
didn't really want to go up to people and say hello because I was so like inside of my house for so long.
Yeah.
So I would say, just rebuild that muscle, kind of like going to the gym. If you haven't been to the gym in a long time, it's going to be harder to do the same reps you used to do.
Yeah.
And then another way that I like networking in person, it's really easy. Just bring somebody with you. I call this you meet one person in the circle that you already know, that person just introduces you to the circle that they're speaking to. So
Yeah.
that's another one. And then one other tip I can give on this is what I call the value list. Make a list of the 10 most generous people in your network that you already know, and make sure they all know each other and have them introduce you to the best people in their network. That's the best
Yeah.
way to do it. That's one piece. The other piece is the difference between online and in-person presenting.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're online, there's a couple of things to keep in mind. You have to be proactive about your energy, because it's a lot easier to show up with energy in person than it is online.
Yeah.
So you want to bring as much of that energy as possible. And then another piece is really eye contact, where when you're online, all you have to do is look in one area, which is the camera lens. But the key here to keep in mind here, Joshua, is even post-pandemic, the online world is here to stay. So we need to get really good at presenting in both mediums.
Yeah, I would 100% agree. I know that the camera basically takes 50% of your emotion out of it, takes 50% of your energy out of it. So, there's a lot of great things that happen because of the pandemic. I mean, Zoom blew up, and now that's what we're doing right now. We're zooming in, and before 2020, we didn't really find value in that too much. And so I think it opened up a great way for us to communicate. I mean, I will tell you, I don't really have conference calls anymore. I have Zoom calls because I want to see people face to face. I want to see the expressions on their face. I want to see their reactions to the things that we're talking about. But we are getting back into in person. And you're right. I think a lot of people are struggling with, I'm actually physically close to somebody. I can feel their presence. It's a little bit awkward to be doing this, but give it some time, and they love it. They love the interaction. They love the energy they get from people. And I think that's absolutely so important. I'm curious to know, with the state of social media, obviously you've got a great YouTube channel that you've created over the last 3 years. And I know that you're on other platforms. Do you feel like there's anything with social media that people need to be very cautious of when it comes to communication, or that they need to be just aware of when it comes to their communication, when it comes to those platforms?
Yeah, for sure, Joshua. You know what I would say is, for social media, I wouldn't say cautious of anything really. I would say it's more about the challenge I've seen is most people just don't do it, period.
Hmm.
Right? They don't put themselves out there. And I would say the message is different based on who we're talking to. But I would say it starts here with step number one. And it doesn't even have to be about social. The biggest thing that shocks me, especially for our business owners listening to this, which some of them might be, is they don't send video messages to their existing and past clients. And I think that's such a wasted opportunity because that's how I make most of my money. Right. I was telling you previous to the show, 50% of my business comes from word of mouth. Why is that? Because all I do is I make a list of all of their birthdays or during the holidays.
Yeah.
I open my dang phone and I go, hey, just thinking about you. Happy birthday. Hope you're having a wonderful day. That's it. And you know what happens 10% of the time? They always have a referral for me without me even asking for it.
Yeah.
And that's really the best way to build a relationship. But let's move business out of the way for a second. What about our family? What about the people that we love? One thing I get people to do is I have my clients' kids send video messages to their grandparents or to people in their family. It always means a lot to them. It makes their day. And that's another reason why video messages are a tool for impact. And I start the conversation there, and then we can worry about social later.
Yeah, I think that I'm glad you said that. Video is so big. Like I couldn't agree with you more. I think not only is video big because obviously the facial expressions, they get to hear your voice. But I also believe too, like when it comes to emails, I'm a huge BombBomb fan. And the reason is because it's the time constraint on it is so awesome. I can send a 2-minute message and it'll take me 2.5 minutes because I got to fill their information in there and then I got to hit send. But that same 2-minute message would have taken me a half an hour to write everything out. Right. And who knows how they would have read it, because if they're in a bad mood, they might have taken my email as I was harping on them, or it was in a different tone. Right. And the communication and the ability to express my emotions through that video, it's so much better. So I think you become very efficient when you do that. I also love, and maybe obviously you can talk about this as well too, handwritten notes and just little notes of communication. Do you not only work with people on the voice and the visual, but also on the written communication as well too?
I'm a lot more focused on the voice and the articulation. There is some written, but I would say for me, it's really focused on the video side. So I'll give you an example. One thing I did with my CEO the other day, and I force all of them to do this, is they have to send video messages to all of their employees. I don't care if they're a janitor. I don't care if they're a vice president of the company. They have to sit down and do a 30-second video for all of them just to say one thing that they're grateful for. So those are the types of things that we focus on because it skyrockets the retention rate of their employees.
How often do you feel they need to be doing that?
Oh, not a lot. Not a lot. Maybe once every 6 months, once every year is more than enough.
Yeah. It's so funny you were talking about that. I just had I had a challenging conversation with one of our staff members yesterday, and she and I have a great relationship. She's been a part of the company for years. She actually worked for my father previous to the employment with us, and we had a really good hard conversation. And then it was a follow up today about, hey, I just want to make sure that I'm doing a good job, and I'm like, okay, like, tell me more about this. And it was because the majority of our conversations are all about improvement and not about appreciation. So what you said is absolutely true. And it was a great eye opener for me going, wow, I know I'm doing it. Because I was like, I appreciate you, right? I mean, we've had some conversations in the past. She's like, yes. I go, but then I had this aha moment, like, do I need to do it more? And she said, that would be great. And so for me, it was like, okay, awesome. Communication better, communication fail, first of all, but communication better and appreciation more, right?
Right, but that makes sense in your case, Josh, right? From one entrepreneur to another, it makes sense because I mean, you're juggling 4 kids, 5 different businesses. I think it's just about how do you find a compromise where it feels that you're appreciating them more without it using extra unit of time or effort on your side, which is why the video message is so effective because you don't need to set all of your employees down for 30-minute conversations and they can keep rewatching the video. So with that same employee, my recommend wouldn't be like appreciating more, having more meetings because your bottleneck is already like at the top of your lungs. It would be more like just send her an extra video message versus everyone else and you'll solve the problem easily.
So another question for you on this, when it comes to communication, I'm super intrigued by it because once again, I don't think that you can, I don't think that there's a cap on communication on your level of it. I think you can always improve on it, right? One, I know that in order to become a better communicator, the painful thing that you have to do is you got to watch yourself, right? You got to watch yourself so you can see the things that you really don't understand you're doing subconsciously. How do you evaluate yourself? Like, so when you're reviewing yourself, what should you be looking for? Like, how do you take that and break that apart so that you can actually try to improve on it?
Yeah, for sure, Joshua. So here's the way that I think about it. We talked a little about this early in the conversation. What differentiates the top 1% communicators from everyone else? And one of the pieces that we talked about is consistency. But now to your point, how do you actually measure consistency in a way that you're improving consistently over time?
Yeah.
So here's the way I think about it. Communication is like juggling 18 balls at the same time. One of those balls is body language, another is storytelling, another one is eye contact, another one's facial expression, and the list just goes on, right? So it can get really confusing for people. So for me, the question now becomes, what are the 3 easiest balls to juggle where it's night as day obvious that we're improving with our communication? So let's go through them. And this goes back to earlier, where if you're not doing these 3 things, like you're never going to hit that top 1% category that we're thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
So number 1 is the random word exercise. Pick a random word like trophy case, like mirror, like lights, like computer screen, and create random presentations out of thin air.
Wow.
And the reason why this exercise is effective, especially for business owners, is because it helps you think on your feet a lot faster than or otherwise you normally would. Another piece around this is if you can make sense out of nonsense, you can make sense out of anything. And that's really the magic of the random word. And you know, it's great because you got 4 kids, Joshua, you don't have to do this alone. So one thing I advise people to do is when you're to and from school, you're picking them up depending on what age they're at.
Yeah.
Or at dinner, you give them random words to do so they'll actually be integrated in your own growth. So that's number 1 of 3.
Okay. Love it. That is really good. Are you going to share the other 2 or do we have
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah, I just did it because everyone's different, right? So some people like to comment in between. Some people just
yeah. No, I'm thinking about that. All right. I'm thinking, I think that's really, really good. I love it because it got me thinking too, is, live videos as opposed to, just record something and then post it. What do? I'm on take number 20. Well, if you're on a live video, you don't get to retake it. You just got to go. And I think forcing yourself to do live videos does the same thing that what you're talking about as well too. So maybe you should do random words with live videos to really get your butt kicked.
Absolutely, right? That's why when you're at, and then we'll go into the other 2, is when you ask me about, well, Brenden, how do you record yourself? Oh, that's ball 7, brother.
Yeah.
Like we got to start with, are you doing the random word exercise 100 times?
Yeah.
And then we'll talk about the other things later, right? So that's the first one. The second one, and this one's killer. If you implement this and you're a business owner, you'll definitely get the value from listening to this conversation. So the second one is question drills. We get asked questions all the time, Joshua.
Yeah.
In our businesses, in life, on a podcast, at school, from our families. But most of us are reactive to those questions. We're not proactive to them. So I'll give you an example. A few years ago, when I started guesting on podcasts, I sucked. I had no idea what I was doing. And I remember one guy asked me, funniest question. He was like, where does the fear of communication come from? And I looked at him and I said, I don't know, man. San Diego, Los Angeles, you tell me. Right? So I had no idea how to answer the question because I was being reactive.
Uh-huh.
So instead, what I did is I took a more proactive approach. So here's what I did instead. Every day, for 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking people. 5 minutes, answer one question that you think the world will ask you about your expertise, your products, or your services. And if you do this once a day for 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking, and you do it for a year, you'll have answered 365 questions about your business and your expertise, and you'll be bulletproof. That's number 2. And then finally, number 3 that we talked about earlier is video messages. I think it's crazy that people don't leverage that enough in their businesses or just in general. And this really ties in just these 3 things. There's so much more tips we can talk about today, but just those 3 things, I have never met a single human being until I've told them about these 3 things who are implementing them consistently before they ever had a conversation with me or heard me on a podcast. And that's the point. It doesn't take that much to be a top 1% communicator in your industry unless you're in a really competitive field, but for the most part it's very doable. Just most people aren't willing to put in the work.
Love it, dude. I'm still thinking about number 2 because I can so relate when I published my first book. I remember going on the first podcast and I was so prepared. I was not prepared. Right. And the questions would come. And of course, they're referencing the book. And I've known the book. Right.
Yeah,
It's
you
like your
wrote it.
people, right? Yeah, exactly. Right. You do. But because you're so over prepared, there's like you kind of forget about it and you don't really know how to answer that question. And I remember feeling like such a failure after that first podcast and going, I don't know what to do next. And uh what I realized, very similar to what you were talking about, is, asking yourself questions every single day and answering it. What I started to do was I started answering the questions from the podcasts that I was listening to and how I would answer those questions when those guests and those people that were talking. And I was telling you, that was an awesome experiment to be able to do because once again, it puts you in those situations where you have to figure out how you would actually answer those questions.
Absolutely. And that's
So,
really the key. It makes all
yeah.
the difference. Just most people don't put in the effort to get it done.
Yeah. Love it. Love it, man. It was some great advice. So, Brenden, where can people follow you? Obviously, you've got the YouTube channel. Tell us about the, where do they find the YouTube channel? You've also got an awesome site where they can go to get some free training from you at rockstarcommunicator.com. But give us an idea of how we can follow you, how we can interact with you. And of course, obviously, there's a great amount of entrepreneurs and business owners that listen to this. How can they get in touch with you to see what you can offer for them?
Yeah, absolutely, Joshua. It's such a pleasure to be on your show, man. Thanks for having me. So 2 ways to keep in touch. One is the YouTube channel. Just go to MasterTalk in one word, and you'll have access to hundreds of free videos on how to communicate ideas effectively. And the second way to keep in touch is to jump over to one of my free trainings. I do one every 2 weeks over Zoom. And these are live trainings. They're not like some recorded webinar. I'm on the call, I'm facilitating, and it's fun. And you can go to rockstarcommunicator.com to find out more about that.
Love it, man. That is so good. All right. So as we end the show, I always love it when our guests are able to breathe life into the people that are listening. So, you're dealing with a bunch of entrepreneurs, people that are probably just, they're just grinding away in a sense. Like they're trying to get to that mountaintop. They're trying to get to that peak and they're doing something that they're passionate about. But as we've noticed, as you've said, a lot of us are just not great communicators. Give them some words of inspiration so that they know that they're either headed on the right track or they need to start investing in themselves in this area of their life.
For sure, Joshua. I'll just end with the question. And the question is simply this: how would your life change if you were an exceptional communicator? How would the world change if you were an exceptional communicator? A lot of us, we get excited about the cars we want to buy, the houses we want to get, the experiences that we want to go on. When was the last time we dreamed about our communication skills? And for most of us, the answer is never. And I recommend your audience start that conversation right now, because communication is so much more than just getting extra sales in a business. It's the way that we talk to our family. It's the way that we order food at a restaurant. It's the way that we make friends when we travel. And once we realize that communication is about leading a more fulfilling life, that's when we start to take it more seriously and start to make the time to do the question drills, to do the random word exercise, and to send those video messages to the people that we really love in our life.
Awesome, man. That was good. Mic drop right there. Loved it, buddy. All right, dude. Hey, thanks so much for being on the show. This has been awesome. And I am just so appreciative of you and pouring into our people, brother.
Likewise, this is super fun.
All right, you guys. Hey, listen, man, that was awesome. We got some great content there. You got some great action items that you can implement into your business today. And obviously, you got some free stuff that you can go get to. So go follow our man, Brenden, on YouTube. Go to his rockstarcommunicator.com. Get a ton of free stuff. And of course, obviously, pay the price to invest in yourself. And we know that Brendan's not going to disappoint you. He's going to help you become that number one producer in your certain area of expertise in your industry. So, all right, you guys know the price of admission for these podcasts right here is just share it. Get it in front of somebody. You know that what Brenden said today not only will impact your life, but also can impact some of your friends, somebody else that you know that needs those communication skills as well too. So share this with them. Absolutely love you. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and we'll talk to you soon.